All right. If you are watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, you are part of the resistance. Welcome to Mission Critical Podcast. We're in our second season. This is one of our first of two live streams this week for War Room Week. Redbeard, before we dive into it, can you remind everybody our new format? What does that even mean, right? Because I have had one or two people who thought they were episode specific. So please bring everybody up to speed.
Yeah, so basically the way that we've done our weeks is it's part of a 3-week cycle. This week happens to be War Room Week, where we focus on foreign issues, but sometimes can be related to some domestic issues. But basically it encompasses not only just the politics of those issues, but the potential confrontations or conflicts that may come about from those issues as well. So again, just to remind everybody, this is War Room Week. This is part of a 3-week cycle. This happens to be the second week of our 3-week cycle. And this focuses predominantly on foreign issues concerning things abroad, but can directly relate to some domestic issues as well. And we'll get into deep dives on those particular topics, hopefully with subject matter experts or just really good bits and pieces of information and perhaps opinions. So,
or as somebody has stated in one of the comments on a video, is the reference was the beards. So I mean, something that the beards has said. So we'll get to that. But one more time so the beards, or maybe it's just the beards talking. First week, Liberty Week. Second week in the cycle, the rotation, the War Room. Third week in the cycle in the rotation, be the difference. So Liberty, War, be the difference, right? And tonight's episode, we're going to be looking at, so, everybody makes these arguments about who's the threat, right? Is the threat this, is the threat that? So the real question is, okay, well, let's try to identify what is the threat, right? And then let's take a look at that threat and say, well, are we overinflating the threat? Are we underinflating the threat? Is this, in other words, is this threat real, or is this threat more dangerous? How does it pertain and apply to so many other facets? As Jeremy said, there will be overlap sometimes between these, segments or these weeks, because, be the difference might have to do with, liberty-minded things. Liberty-minded things also have to do with international relations and potential conflict. So there's going to be some overlap at some point. So we will bring on our guest here. You've seen him before, a man of mystery who needs no introduction, but he should always do it just because. And Redbeard, we got to do one of these next times for us as well. We haven't mentioned who the hell we are besides the beards. I don't think that comment was me. I think that was you and Stephen Blackbeard. I think that was the beards. All right, Patrick, as always, a pleasure seeing you. We really appreciate it. Give everybody a little down and dirty, and then, but before you do that, let me start off the questioning, right? So War Room, is the threat over, hyper, you already kind of said that. So you see what I'm getting at. Are we overdoing it, underdoing it? Is it just BS? Is it just claptrap? Is it propaganda? And in this case, we're going to talk about China. So after you give yourself your introduction, just jump right into it. Agree, disagree. Is China really, how much of a threat, if at all, does it pose to the United States of America? Well, and the rest of the free world, if that's such a thing anymore. Patrick, to you, sir.
Hey, first of all, thanks for having me back again. I really appreciate being on. Just a quick intro on myself for those who haven't seen me before. I've got a lot of years in the military, with law enforcement, with the intel community. Worked with Mark in both the military and the CIA side of the house. And I find myself in a government position right now where I'm dealing a lot with China. So this is a well-timed topic for me. Just go ahead and answer your question. Is China a threat? Yeah, they are. And they're probably, as it was quoted to me when I first joined my new organization under Homeland Security, enemy number 1, 2, and 3. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit here coming up.
Sure. Awesome. Oh. You're muted.
There
Mark.
it is. All right. I'm sorry. I was behind screens trying to get what Patrick just sent me. I was trying to get so I have an excuse this time. However, just with a little bit of humor before we get too deep into the weeds here. I challenge everybody on Thursday to play a drinking game called "How many times is Mark muted?" Mark, your mic is muted. Mark, your mic is, and just like, every time that happens, and I will not try to screw you over, but every time that happens, you have to take a drink, because that just happened right there. So I apologize, Patrick. I was saying, because I'm trying to get that that PDF that you sent me. I'm trying to get that ready. But again, I think you can expound upon that right now. So your statement was, hey, when we were doing X threat, or primary focus, main target, main enemy, 1, 2, and 3. Flesh that out just a tad bit more. I think that's fair before we dive into it a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I won't mute my mic this time.
Okay. Or so you say.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I had to wrap my mind around that statement too when that was mentioned to me, because my background largely came from a counterterrorism world, just like Mark. Everything was focused on that. Our entire government for I guess that's the best way to look at it, was largely focused on terrorism. That's what we fought for 20 plus years. So we got fairly good at that, and because of the focus and the manpower and the money put behind that stuff, we kind of took our eye off some other balls. And one of those balls was the espionage threat. A lot of people think of Cold War, they think of the old school, some guy meeting a guy on a bench in Europe somewhere and that type of stuff. Well, it's alive and well, and it's here, folks. So China is probably the biggest threat that we face right now, strategic, globally, right? So on a diplomatic level, I think they're kind of owning us. They've got partnerships with countries all over the world. What they're trying to do with that is build their base. They're trying to take up as much territory as they can through what they call the Belt and Rail Initiative. And in that construct, how that works is they come into a country that's got natural resources that they want. You want me to pause?
Well, I think maybe just going just a little too. I want to hold that for a second. I guess
okay.
Is what I'm saying. Yeah. So let me just hold that for a second, because we don't need to go into the substance of it at this moment. Again, the argument is yes, this is threat number 1 and 2 and 3, right? And here's the things. I think we can break those down into or areas. I'm going to want to include some of my own, but before we do that. I apologize, Redbeard, and I apologize to everybody watching, not making excuses, but I got a little sidetracked there. But Redbeard, you've got a good opening statement, right? And I know, and maybe that will help the audience kind of get their head around, okay, well, what are we doing? And that's why I said I slowed you down, Patrick, because we're jumping a little bit too much.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. Let
me end my opening statement with China is a multifaceted threat, and it's something like we haven't seen before.
Yeah. All right, Redbeard, let's come over to you. Right. So we got a little. Let's put some more meat on the bones before we start stripping the meat away.
And hopefully I do Patrick justice by giving him a nice little bedrock or platform to jump off of. So basically, for my opening statement, when it comes to China, we have so many in government that are providing so much bluster. They're complaining. They're like, China's doing this, or they're terrible, or whatever their argument tends to be. But I find a pretty deep-seated irony in the fact that the very people that they tend to dislike, we also have been continuously funneling money over there. It seems fairly hypocritical to complain about a country or a government, but then yet we tend to still funnel money over there, whether it's through exports, imports, whatever the case might be, along with many other facets of that. And it presents a pretty serious issue, because we can construe this as we're being sold out. It's not a very good feeling when you have people that have a lot of bluster that turn around and they're like, okay, well, we're still going to buy steel from you. We're going to do this. We're going to do that, when we could be domestically doing these things ourselves. And
right there, just quick example.
Yep.
And if people don't understand what Jeremy just said, so just think about this. What's being spoken behind the curtain? And if you don't think this happens, just go all the way back to the Obama era, where he was hot mic'd talking to not Putin, but to their equivalent. What's that?
Was it G or somebody else?
No. It was like Putin's number two I see. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Like their vice president. But he was hot mic'd and he was like, hey, after I win the election, I'll be able to do a lot more things,
Yeah.
like, so to Jeremy's point, the argument is like people are saying one thing and doing another. And I'm just trying
Right.
to put it into some historical context.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Redbeard.
And it's really nice that you bring that up, because another point that I want to make as well, just to kind of buffer this out a tad bit more for Patrick, especially, is, then they have the audacity to sit here and be like, oh, like TikTok's the worst thing in the world because they take and they sell American information and blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, well, if that's the case, then I would actually suggest that people look into who the stockholders are of TikTok and actually understand that company before you're going to level that argument. That aside, though, what is it that they would be doing if it was the Chinese government at this juncture with regard to our information of violating information privacy and putting our information at risk, that this government has not already done by force or by way of the Patriot Act to begin with? They usurp our information every single day without our actual just consent, and they have no problem being able to do that. But whenever it's somebody else doing it, or assumed to be somebody else, they're terrible, they're bad. And on just a final note here, I think there's a lot more at risk here. There's a lot more areas that we need to be considerate of and putting time, people, and resources into, versus specifically looking at not only banning or limiting an app that has no bounds, which we'll get into later, but are actually critical to running our country the way that we need to, even down to a state level. So with that, I yield the floor.
So I just want to reiterate what you're saying. So one of the takeaways when I read your notes, and look, TikTok is in the news and everybody's talking about it, and you've got the Dan Crenshaws and the Lindsey Grahams of the world saying nuke them, ban them.
Yeah.
Well, but to your point, Jeremy, the argument is, well, it's run by the Chinese Communist Party. Okay, everybody knows that. And and because that and the Chinese Communist Party is evil, well, then why are we doing all this other business with businesses that are associated with the Chinese Communist Party? That's one counterpoint. And then the second thing is, oh, but they're collecting your data. And then what Redbeard just said, and so is every other one of the mainstream media, social media platforms. They're doing the same damn thing on you, right? And they're controlling. So, well, hang on. So if these guys are evil for these reasons, well, then what about Meta? What about, ScrewTube? What about,
what about the government itself?
Well, and look at, exactly, we've got people in our administration who are coming out and clearly look, and I know it's politics, but when do politics go into freaking out half of the country and trying to tell everybody that Donald Trump said it's going to be a bloodbath? I mean, the DNC, the president and the vice president are promoting this. So hang on a second. How is that any different from your argument about TikTok, right? Or China? So, but maybe that'll come up a little bit more on Thursdays, because that might be a little bit domestic, but bringing it over to Patrick. I mean, Redbeard, I think you nailed it on that. Well, if it's going to be this, if that's the argument there, then why isn't that same argument? Why does that not apply here? And why are we Go ahead.
Yeah. And I was just going to say quickly, notwithstanding the dangerous precedents that it's going to set rather, for down the road, because if they get a little bit of leeway on who they can ban, when they can ban, and what they can ban, then you have to understand that this is a authority that they're not going to give up once it's provided. So
just like the Patriot Act, like you brought it up, they're not going to give that shit up. Just like the city of Chicago, the state of Illinois said, hey, we just got to tax everybody for this freeway system we're building. And then what's going to be a toll, and then but then once we got that and we paid it off, then it's never, ever happened. And there's not an example in the history of mankind where government, I mean, maybe there is, and I don't know about it. Maybe, honestly, there's one that I can think of. George Washington saying, yeah, no, I'm done. I did my term. See you guys later. This is how it's supposed to work. And he could have set himself up, completely differently. But bringing this back now over to Patrick. All right. So you kind of see the premise that, Redbeard was laying out. I've got some of my own arguments, but, the question was, what is the threat? Is there really a threat or is it all overblown? To Redbeard's point, he's casting some doubt. Well, hang on a second. Is TikTok really the threat? Because if that's the threat for the reasons you've just given me, well, then how is any other social media platform less of a threat? They're all doing the same damn things. They're just part of the American system, and the other company is part of the Chinese system. So that's one thing you can either agree or disagree on, or use that to go into where you were trying to go with as you started laying out those building blocks when I stopped you earlier. Does that make sense, sir?
Yeah, it sure does.
Okay. All right. Rock
Yep.
and roll, sir. It's all you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. So if I had to compare and contrast, TikTok, ByteDance with, the other companies that are in the Silicon Valley that are, U.S. owned. The only real difference is that, TikTok is owned by the Chinese government, right? There are ties there, and that's why you see the CEO running and hiding when he's asked questions about it because he doesn't want to be on camera, basically lying. One of the biggest differences between what how that's used in China versus here, there are severe restrictions put on what can be shown and used on there, and it's a lot of pro-Chinese government, pro-party propaganda stuff and education. They're trying to strengthen their public's knowledge and expand with whatever tool that they can, which is something that we could do as well. However, you've also got situations, and our own U.S. owned companies do this too. They'll build the algorithm, say whatever you are interested in, you're going to see over and over and over again. It's like your digital best friend, and no one can compete with that. So when you're spending 6, 7, 8 hours a day, or maybe even longer, some people wasting your time, you compare and contrast that to the folks over in China who again are using that for education. That's a big concern. As far as what we talked about before, whenever you sign up for something, the details are always in that small print. And if it says that your information sharing policies or privacy policies have been updated, this, that, and the other, if there's a term third party in there, that term is never defined, and that means that anybody that could be another Chinese owned company. So you might as well just fast track your info right to them. The other question that I hear quite often is, well, what difference does it make if the Chinese government has all my information? Well, I don't know yet, but one of the things that's very concerning on our side on the government is, there's a big race for quantum computing, and once quantum computing reaches a certain level and it's tied in with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and that type of stuff, all information is going to be available. Like if you think your privacy is been jeopardized, here and there with like OPM breaches or certain, things with your banking accounts and stuff like that, it's going to go to a whole different level. There's not going to be anything that even remotely resembles any type of privacy. And that's very scary from banking, from national security levels. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on and on. And if anyone can see everything that you've posted, no matter what, security, protocols or settings that you put on your social media or your emails or whatever, that's the big concern. So coming back to TikTok and those guys, I mean, I think that's really the only difference. We know about it. So who knows where else that's going to go.
Redbeard, I see you nodding your head back there.
Yeah.
What do you got? I think that kind of dovetails with something that you were saying, that what Patrick just said kind of dovetails what you said a few seconds ago.
Yeah. It's one of those things to where when we do look at something like TikTok, I get it. Like, it's one of those things that's very easy to point out and isolate and be like, oh, well, it could be used for this issue or that issue. And it's like, look, like this, like, I just want to say, like, anytime that you share your information with somebody, you should have a general aura of caution to begin with. Like, you are providing this information, unless, of course, somebody's got a proverbial gun to your head. You have the option to share or not share. That means you may not be able to access certain applications or whatever. But I do find it perplexing that we have politicians like Dan Crenshaw that are so hell-bent on trying to ban something like this, when, quite frankly, and I'm going to bring up a couple points here quick, which I would like Patrick to actually expound upon. But what about our critical infrastructure, like our water, energy, comms, land, and food, which the Chinese have huge investments and control over in the United States, land and food especially. The illegal aliens and immigration, infiltrating, medical and educational and scientific institutions. We also see manufacturing, economy, which they own the bulk of our debt, which puts us in a very precarious position. And notwithstanding the potential infiltration of military intelligence and many other facets. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but to me, this is far more cause of concern than a potential application. I mean, in the end of the day, those workplaces also could say, hey, as an employee here, we don't want to have you on TikTok. That's a condition of your employment. And you can add a barrier of security that way. But those issues seem to be more important than an application does, which we seem to have done very little to actually reinforce. So
if I may, before we come over to you, Patrick, sorry, let me just get this comment off of there. Everybody's seen that enough. To Redbeard's point, right? And I don't want to lump it all in, because each of these things can be broken down, and they should be broken down into their own category. When we're talking infrastructure, what does that mean? Right? The critical infrastructure, the economy, our agriculture. I mean, Redbeard isn't wrong. And if you don't know what he's talking about, well, then you're probably watching mainstream media, or you're not listening to our podcast. And we're not Dan Bongino. I ain't sitting here saying we're bringing all the receipts all the time, because this isn't that type of show. But that's it. I mean, we do bring up articles. Those articles are out there for everybody to see and follow. So to Redbeard, to the overarching point, what is the threat against the homeland right now, or the West, however you want to call it? Freedom. Let's just call it, what's the threat to freedom right now? And if it's China, and Redbeard's point, well, and if TikTok is such an issue to Mr. Crenshaw, then why aren't all these other issues he just brought up? Well, so that, I'm just going to pause. I'm going to leave it at that from my side. It causes me pause. It makes me scratch my already bald. Maybe that's why I'm bald. I just keep scratching my head every day, and I got no hair left, because I'm like, well, if it's true there, then how in the hell, why aren't you concerned about it over here? Because this is equally or potentially even more detrimental. Should we lose, or should that fail, those systems, that critical infrastructure and everything else that Redbeard has said? Because that, you can make an argument, is like the minds of our future, the minds of our citizenry. Yeah, that's at risk, propaganda, XYZ, but none of that'll matter if no one has electricity or running water, or they're, like all the farm, X, Y, and Z critical infrastructure. Redbeard, I know I kind of spoke for you a little bit. I want to come to Patrick, but did I do a pretty good job of kind of encapsulating that?
Yeah, no, you did a pretty good job, honestly. I mean, you're making you're reinforcing my argument, which is like, look, like in the end of the day, these things are a lot more critical than an application. Look, you can live without an application.
Here it is. Again, we're notes. If this is so important, right? And if this is such a threat, then why are we doing it? To Redbeard's point, why do we continue to sell land and let balloons fly over our country? And
you can live without an application. It becomes exponentially harder to live without heat in the north, and basic food, basic necessities. And when you're selling land, you're also selling out the inheritance of our founding fathers to us as Americans, which is rightfully ours. I've never consented to you to give our land away. And to do so, in my opinion, is treasonous.
Well, okay. Well, let's bring that one up on Liberty Week, or even on Thursday, because that is literally, that's actually a great point. Yeah, we've elected you, but like, how many of these are unelected bureaucrats that are just going along with this stuff and allowing this, where it's like, and so again, now bringing it to Patrick from, your perspective and, your personal background and experience in this field right now. I mean, again, do you see where we're kind of going? Agree, disagree, or, and state your case, sir. Because I know you got a bunch of things to say here.
Yeah, I could go on for a long time. So you feel free to rein me in if I get too far off track. But you were talking about farmland, that type of stuff, property near military bases, like the post down there says. 100%. Smithfield Farms was a big, I think, a big hog farming thing on the East Coast, and it was owned by a guy and his family for something like 40, 50 years, or maybe longer. And then they finally sold out to another company. And lo and behold, that company is owned by the Chinese. So if we back up just a little bit, I don't know when we covered this before, I'll just give like a quick primer. It's really good for folks to look at it through this lens. And that, if we remember DIME, which is an acronym that stands for diplomacy, information, you could also throw intelligence in there, military, and then economic. We're facing a fight at each one of those levels, right? So the economic side, critical infrastructure, companies on the East Coast that are buying cranes and stuff like that to offload containers off of ships and stuff like that. Well, why are they buying cranes from, Chinese-owned companies? That seems a little suspect in and of itself. You can do a lot of things technologically with a long piece of metal, and that's something that our governments had to take pause and look at. All the farm fields that are being bought up, all the cattle. Why are the cattle dying off? Why are the hogs being fed strange mixtures of food that makes the meat not so healthy anymore? Why are the pesticides being put on the food that kills it off and steals a lot of the nutritional value? Is this by mistake? I don't think so. I mean, I think this is another economic warfare tactic that the Chinese use. And I don't think they're really hiding any of this stuff. It's only when they're called out do they play it's not really owned by us. It's owned by this, Smith company. Well, no, you guys bought that, right? You're just keeping the name. It's a shell game. So that's something we need to be mindful of. Another scary thing too, when we were dealing with our food supply, right? Food and energy stuff. That's a huge, security sector thing that we have to watch. How many people drive around out in the cornfields or what wheat fields or whatever, and check and see, hey, is anybody really out here? I mean, it's not very often that happens. Well, there are people in universities, both here and in the Western universities and China, that are largely, Chinese folks that focus on, crops and the health and what makes plants grow, what makes them sick. If you do that, if you understand how to make, plants grow well, you also know what can make them sick and kill them. That's something we really need to be mindful of, whether we sell these farms to Chinese-owned companies or not. They could enact bio warfare and kill our crops, which definitely impacts the food supply. I mean, folks, it just goes on and on and on. Universities being as a major target focus for non-traditional collectors. And I'll kind of end this segment by saying that, a lot of folks don't realize in 2017, the Chinese Communist Party passed a law, and you can look this up. It's called the Military Civil Fusion Law or the Intelligence Law, which requires every Chinese national, whether it's for academic, corporate, or anything, it requires them to collect information that's going to benefit the party and the advancement of the PLA, the People's Liberation Army. And we see that all the time. So these inadvertent, incursions into military bases, they're driving past the guard shacks and, I was lost looking for Burger King, that type of crap, when they're actually taking photos and things like that. These happen all the time. And it's not by mistake. I'll take a pause here. That was a lot.
Well, it is. Yeah. And just for all future references, I'm just as guilty this week. The first time we introduced something that's maybe from our previous lives or wheelhouse, so let everybody know what you mean by non-traditional collector. Like, I think most people were like, what does that even mean? And then also and then remind, and then do DIME. I brought it up. So do DIME one more time. And I'll do DIME first, because if you just look at it through this lens, they usually fit in one of these categories, right? Even the farm fields and that type of stuff. It's economy as well. DIME is diplomacy, dealing with politicians too. Take a look at what happened with San Francisco. They just allowed a non-U.S. person to be on their local election board. Chinese national, or they said she's from Hong Kong. Well, Hong Kong belongs to China, and it has since '97. The second I is information or intelligence. The information thing, we talked about TikTok. One thing that caught my attention with the information warfare, when we started interviewing people that were behavioral psychologists that work for the social media companies. And they're there to help put those algorithms together. What makes people tick? What's going to draw them to this, that, and the other in general terms? And how to teach the algorithms to learn specifically about you so that you can be targeted. That was very concerning to me.
The military side, we're starting to see the Chinese like rattle the saber and say, hey, look, you know what? There's a one China policy, and we should take back what's ours, and they're not shy about saying that. That's something that needs to be paid attention to as well. Not only that, but also building small little bases and ports around the world for the purposes of extracting critical, not critical infrastructure, but rare earth minerals and that type of stuff. You can also, those can be dual purpose. They can extract stuff and put it on ships, but they can also bring ships in and bring troops. So something else to watch. And then finally, the economy. That's something. And if we've been guilty of this for a long time. When I say we, I'm saying collectively in the West, US, Canada. If you have a small company that requires a lot of production, a lot of people that were funding these efforts would say, hey, why don't you outsource that to China, because you can get really cheap labor and you can produce more for less, and guess what, we can have a better profit. Well, the problem is that made China a lot of money. And also, with them stealing intellectual property rights left, right, and sideways. I mean, I'm not a fan of Gucci or Gucci purses, or I don't own a Rolex watch, but yet there's plenty of them that are knockoffs that look pretty good thanks to the Chinese. So that's dime right there. Mark, keep me on track. What else was I supposed to bring up?
Non-traditional collectors.
Non-traditional collectors. Yeah. So in the information intel side, the traditional way of going about, getting information from anything is to put somebody in there who's trained, put them into a place where they can talk to people that have placement and access to whatever information you need. Well, the Chinese have decided, hey, we've got numbers on our side, so let's just make everybody a collector of information intelligence. They don't have to be trained. They just have to be given some briefs, on operational security, and say, hey, look, just don't tell them what this is about. Don't tell them what that's about, and just send us the information back. And that's been happening now for probably about 10 to 15 years. And we're starting to realize, hey, a lot of the U.S. government funded research in our universities that goes to, advancing our own capabilities on the military side, on the scientific side, in space. A lot of people don't think of space as a thing yet, but it's alive and well. And next time you look at your GPS in your car, you think that there's something up there allowing that to happen. So anyway, that's they're kind of all over the place. So non-traditional collector would be any person that's just a student, a businessman, a tourist that's over here for a specific purpose, and that purpose may be, oh, hey, I'm going to go, fly fishing, but I'm actually going to go check out that Air Force base that's over there and see what kind of aircraft they have, right? So, or if there's an air show, stand by. They're all over those things because they want to see the new technology and they want to ask pointed questions. It's a collection effort.
On that note, before we come over to your Redbeard, because there's two things that is kind of like, intersecting between your whole conversation. So back on the the economy side of it. And this isn't just with China, right? This goes back to Redbeard's question. In my mind, it does. Like, so if Dan Crenshaw hates TikTok, why doesn't he hate these other things as well? And these other things are, hey, what was going on during the Obama, and go do your own research. Obama administration, the Clinton, because remember, she was Secretary of State. And then I think it was Skokovo was called. The Russians set up this thing. The State Department was all on board with this, where American companies were working with the Russians on certain technology. Did that lead to Russian, potential breakthroughs in hypersonic technologies, X, Y, and Z? I don't know, but that's the point. And then because what Patrick just said, that is clearly the case. Many US-based companies, when wanting to outsource and do business in China, for Patrick's reasons, why? Because it's cheap ass labor, right? So Redbeard has a good point on why you should be supporting American companies, but that allure is clouding people's judgment. But the way the Chinese do it, and Patrick, call me if I'm wrong, call me out if I'm wrong here, but it's by getting you to sign, non-disclosures and certain agreements where the tech that you had for this thing, and you now want to invest in Chinese companies to help you make this thing, you are now then sharing that tech. So from an industrial espionage situation, I don't necessarily have to have somebody in America, playing the long game and then getting hired by that company and then exfiltrating that data. I can actually just make it where, like, if you want to have this contract with me and enjoy the fruits of your cheap ass labor, well, then you're going to sign an agreement with me where, like, it's your IP, your intellectual property is no longer proprietary, right? It has to be part of our joint venture. And then what did they just get? They got a piece of dual use technology, gyroscopic technology, hypersonic, aviations, X, Y, and Z. So, Patrick, are you seeing that, or is any of that making any sense? You want to?
Yeah, it does. You're spot on. I mean, I'll get dirty here for a second, but if you get in bed with the Chinese to do business, get ready, because you're gonna get screwed, and it's gonna hurt. That's generally how it happens. All they need to do is get a foot in the door. They can check out anything that you've got, and the next thing you know, they find a disgruntled person who's got access to whatever the source code or whatever is very valuable in that company. And if they can't get it out themselves, they'll get somebody else to give it to them, and off they go. They're done. And then that company, continues on with their business until they realize, hey, what do you know? There's 2 or 3 companies that do the same thing for cheaper or better, because they've been undercut. So yeah, that happens quite a bit too. One thing that I'll take it to a different level now on a national, or I guess a regional level, especially in Africa. One of the things that the Chinese government's doing is they're going into these, like third world countries and saying, hey, how'd you like to be in charge of this country? We'll give you money. We'll give you a military. We'll give you all this stuff. You just need to sign over the rights to your copper, your lithium, whatever, valuable resource that country has. And we'll also build you a port and railways and all this stuff. And once we're done, you can just keep this stuff. And, somebody that's power hungry hears that and says, yeah, let's go for it, because I don't have any prospects doing anything else. They build that stuff, but they haven't signed over all the rights to it. And then if they complain saying they want to cut, they say, oh, well, guess what? We'll just shut all this stuff down, or we'll take it. It's all strong arm tactic stuff. And then that country is just kind of screwed. Every time I talk to somebody from Africa, it's the same story. And it's very concerning.
Right on. Just 2 comments that came in, Redbeard, and I'll come over to you, because I actually, so we've already kind of, and boys and girls, if you watch this and you've seen our podcast, I mean, yeah, we're trying to do better. We actually do have little notes and stuff that we're sharing with each other. But at the end of the day, I mean, the conversation just takes its natural course. And, Redbeard is probably like pissed off at me because we had this game plan and then I screwed it up. But then Patrick took us in a completely different direction. That comes all the way back to Redbeard, So, but on that note, as we kind of go into it, I know we just did it. We really just kind of focus on the economics, the tech side, and to include the social media, right? Because that's tech, right? I'm going to personally want to, just giving everybody a heads up, I'm going to want to bring this back more into the kinetic, whether you want to call it, so Patrick informed everybody, non-traditional collectors. I want to bring it into the things that I know a lot about. I know that sounded horrible. I apologize, but the formal, the trained intel collector, and then from that military, again, whether you're using coin or carver, however you're going to look at it, because you may not have picked up, just even in this fast and furious 30 minutes, we've already talked about all these things that have taken place in the United States right now. It's happening all around you. Some media is covering it. And can I sit here and prove definitively that this is what it is? It's unconventional warfare? No, but looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, might be a duck. Redbeard, I just had to throw that out there. I do want to give Angry Viking a quick shout out here. And we don't necessarily have to address this specifically, but it goes into what Patrick's saying, just even from the non-traditional collector and then the traditional collector perspective too. But his comments about no one really took OPSEC, ComSec very seriously. And that is, in my opinion, if I was the enemy of America, he's absolutely right. I'd be like, yeah, these guys don't take this shit seriously. And there's so many, again, are just even our recent, the last month or two, there was industrial espionage that just happened at a major company. We just had one or two more people at military bases. So, I mean, he's absolutely right. Oh, and then that's the 4th one. And then we had some retired clown who was like on his TikTok or his chat being honeypotted with probably like, a dude over in China. And he was like, oh, I love you. And he was doing exactly that. So Angry Viking veteran is 100% right. Yeah. Just hang out near a bar, but depending what you're looking for, but that's not a bad point. So, all right, fellas.
Mark, can I interject some here?
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, no, take it where you guys want to take it.
Yeah. I was going to say Angry Viking spot on, because I did that through my military career, and we would often go to like the E Club, the O Club, and just listen to people gripe and complain, or maybe try to prompt them to do that. And it's amazing what people will just give you without without much effort. That's kind of scary. That's one thing.
You might have to spend a little bit on like, a top level scotch, depending on who your target is. If it's Joe, if it was me and you,
the O Club,
that was a couple Miller Lights and maybe some shots of Jägermeister
or some beers or something.
Yeah.
It's just it's crazy. I don't know. We were talking about the OPSEC thing also, just like in general with universities too. When somebody wants to go to university, regular U.S. citizen, I mean, like you're looking for, unless you've got family that's got the means that can throw that money down, it's usually like some type of grants you're getting, or if you are a veteran, hey, you're using your VA benefits or whatever, right? And the school doesn't collect that money right off the bat. Well, because of our business dealings with China for decades now, they've got the money, and they'll send their folks to the universities, and they throw that money down. Hey, how'd you like to have this student here for 4 years paid in full? Well, heck yeah, they want them paid in full. So they like that. So they've gotten, our universities have become addicted to the money, and they're willing to like not look at the operational security side or question, hey, why is it that we have an inordinate amount of students from China studying, STEM programs that have possible military applications? So that's something very scary too. Back on the last thing I'll end on with that is on the OPSEC side, a lot of corporations, and if you're one of these guys, I apologize, but if they like to hire former police chiefs to be their head of corporate security. Well, I don't know, but a lot of former police chiefs don't have intel experience and wouldn't understand somebody ripping off all of their, closely held intellectual property secrets. It's not something they ever experienced in their law enforcement career. They might be good at loss prevention, but that's a whole different animal. So sometimes those are probably not the best folks, unless you got somebody with counterintelligence or human intelligence experience. You might want to consider some of those folks now.
Yeah. Hey, I know when I first left, and I don't know if this was when you and I were kind of talking about the training side, but one of the things I was very seriously contemplating was the industrial espionage, corporate espionage side, and kind of farming myself out, and trying to get into that world, because it's absolutely huge. But as I think the points you've raised clearly illustrate, that's the old way of doing business with the way technology is. Yep. And the way that, to Redbeard's point, and matter of fact, coming over to Redbeard on this, and to Redbeard's point, the simple fact that we're so in bed, we're so joined at the hip, we're snap linked in. And for all the Dan Crenshaws and the Lindsey Grahams and all those clowns out there, on both sides of the aisle saying, this, that, and other, it really should cause you some pause. Like, well, why do you want to ban that? Because all the other guys are doing the same thing. Or what about, why did you just sell more land? To Patrick's point, why did you just sell more land outside, a half a mile away from one of our other strategic locations? And I'm here to tell you, whether that's, conducting surveillance, and, Patrick already said it, just even watching how you fly and when you fly and what you're flying. I mean, like, there's so many levels. We could spend, honestly, we could spend weeks talking about this. This is so much more detailed. But if Redbeard, to Redbeard's point, this is serious. And yet we got clowns talking about TikTok while they're on TikTok, and while they're doing all the, and they're, Redbeard, I know you got something to add to that.
Yeah.
Bring it with you, sir.
I brought this up before, and I'm hoping Patrick can expound upon this just real quick, because I think it factors into everything that we're talking about, especially espionage. You guys brought up the military point of view, and while it's not specifically just military, I want to remind people that a lot of vendors and attendees at the recent SHOT Show for 2023, in a couple previous years, had noticed an uptick in people that were at least assumedly from China, that were not only going over to different firearm expos or firearm kiosks, if you will, but they were asking and taking pictures of the operating systems of firearms. They were asking for full breakdowns of firearms. They were asking very pointed and specific questions about certain details of firearms. And I want to remind people that there's a mixture of both, general, everyday citizen bought firearms to law enforcement and military specific stuff that's featured at SHOT Show. It's become a very, very firearms centric show, and there is an issue when you're starting to have vendors that are like, hey, like, we have a lot of people coming into this show and they're asking a lot of very specific questions, and they're asking a lot of very pointed questions. Plus, they're asking us to take these things down, and they're going through different, procedures for the functions. They're taking pictures and stuff like that. This is problematic because, when you're having vendors that are saying, hey, here's an issue, and we know that these people are not from here. We know that these people seemingly have an alternative, disposition or reason to be here. This is becoming problematic. And Patrick, I think I talked to you about this on a previous podcast, but I mean, if they know what the average person here on the civilian side is able to access, and they know what the police are able to access, and they know what the military is able to access at SHOT Show and these other, firearm specific expos, like, that's a problem, because they are knowing from the top down, from the military down to the average person, more than likely what everybody has access to. And maybe it's for, just reproduction purposes or technical aspects, but what better way to know what your potential adversary is than what they have?
Well, so let me just jump in here real quickly, and we'll come to Patrick, and then we're almost at intermission. Yep. And there's a couple comments that have come in both in the back side and then on the front side and then on my phone as well. So I'll kind of try to follow this, but I hate to be crude here, but it's like really become a dick measuring contest. I've been to SHOT Show once. I've got nothing against SHOT Show, but it's just, it seems to me that is not the most, like, if I was the head of your security, I would really very seriously be cautioning you of what you're even displaying or what you're talking about, because it doesn't even have to be China in this case. Again, so if we're looking at what the real threat is, if you're a business and you're doing this, and I'm going to say this selfishly from my perspective, I've had my products ripped off by other American companies. It's happened multiple times. I've had people call me up and pretend to be customers, and then I've stupidly answered their questions. And then 2 months later, you see somebody making their version of my product with all of those little tweaks that the questions they're asking. So why are we doing that? Why is our ego, me in my case, I'm just trying to be nice and answer customer questions. So maybe it's not ego. In all fairness, maybe I should take a step back. Maybe you're just trying to answer questions, but it's one thing when, for me, I'm talking to a normal person. If you're BAE, it's a major company, or if you're Northrop Grumman or something like that, and some guy, like me, comes up and starts asking you questions about that night vision technology or that new infrared technology, am I really the person you want to be having that conversation with? Wouldn't you rather be talking to that other person who represents a large company or the United States military? And that can open itself up to its own set of problems. So I just want to kind of leave that for you guys to respond. And then we got to bring up this thing from that Angry Viking brought up, but you guys want to respond to that? Does that make sense? So again, I'm not necessarily poo-pooing it, but it's another example, like, we're our own worst enemies. Like, you're just going out there and be like, ego, like, oh yeah, look at this cool shit we're making, and then to what Angry Viking said, just hang out at a bar and buy some people some shots of Jägermeister, and then they'll start to this point, look at half the crap that what's his face gets away with. This is a little bit more political. Not Breitbart. What's the guy's name? He does undercover shit. It's ran the tip of my tongue.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I know who you're talking about.
He just did one, and it's him. His face has been all over. And look at, so to Patrick's point and to my point, from the collection perspective, where we have experience, to Redbeard's point from just a human being, and it makes sense. Look how easy it is. And to Angry Viking veterans point, dude, people we're running our mouths way too much. So if this is a real threat, Mr. Crenshaw, then maybe we should be educating our people on how to defeat it. And, and maybe we should be scrutinizing all the sales of property or this or that or the other thing, to what we've all talked about so far. James O'Keefe, thank you very much, Mike, and whoever popped that up. I appreciate that. That must have been you, Redbeard. So, all right, fellas, go into that, and I'm going to kind of get a setup for our little intermission.
I will let Patrick take it away on this one.
Okay, Patrick.
Okay. So the skill on the business side that we're referring to is elicitation. And if you're going to bring whatever your goodies are, whether it's aircraft, whether it's firearms, whether it's technical equipment, that type of thing, there's definitely going to be people there that are going to try to gather as much information on that as they possibly can. So it is an ego thing. I personally took part in a, I won't say exactly where, but there was an International Chiefs of Police conference over a decade ago. And the guy that was in charge of the office I was with decided to roll out one of our technical vans that was used for operations and have a layout on the table of all the equipment that we use. And I said, well, hey, wait a minute. You want us to what? Oh yeah, we want to show everybody this stuff. I'm like waiting for somebody to like speak sense to the boss. Like, hey, could you tell him like that's kind of sensitive and we shouldn't be showing? No, we have to do it. But he's the boss. That's just kind of the knee-jerk reaction. But basically, all that stuff was on display for anybody that was there, whether they were a chief of police or not, or some other vendor. So that's always a situation. You're going to have that. The problem is, do we have enough trained people watching? Is there enough of a counterintelligence presence? Because you're trying to identify people that are probing these questions. Are all the people that are the vendors, are they prepared, to be asked those questions? Because it's usually going to happen. And then who do they report it to? And how do they go about letting somebody know, hey, this guy over here just asked something, right? So sometimes that's quiet and sometimes it's coordinated more than others. But the problem with the Chinese is you're not dealing with what we call a KIO, a known intelligence officer. You're dealing with some guy who maybe his day job is, I work at, this university or this lab or something like that. And he's just doing this on the side because he knows he's going to either make some money or get some kind of favors from his government off of that. Right. So what does the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Department of Justice, what are they prepared to do to somebody like that? And they're going to push that envelope as far as they can. And if they don't get bit, and they're just going to keep pushing it. So that's what we're seeing all the time. So I think there's more of an education that needs to go on for anybody that's going to have one of these, have a booth at one of these type events, especially when it deals with like law enforcement, national security, anything. And definitely even like cyber stuff too. I can't believe some of the people that show up or the companies that show up at these cyber conferences and like actually what they're talking about, because they're there from a salesmanship standpoint. If you're there from an intel collection standpoint, you're more than willing to listen to whatever they've got and be the interested party. I mean, who wouldn't do that? So we've got to tighten up a lot on that stuff. And it is, I don't know if it's ego, money, or both, but we usually have a ton of those things throughout the country that we keep an eye on. And whether it's Tampa, there's like special operations stuff. There's SHOT Show, International Chiefs of Police, anything that deals with like security. I think there might even be some type of Homeland Security conference too. So just open source stuff and find it on your own, and then it's being targeted. Anytime there's an air show too, or like I don't know if they still do this. They have Fleet Week in New York, or they used to have some big yearly thing at San Diego where the Navy and the Marine Corps like storm the beach and do like an amphibious assault landing, and then they have like a dog and pony show after that. That's all that stuff is just you're throwing a nice juicy lure waiting for that fish to bite, and they're going to.
And so to that point, before we come over to Blackbeard, or correction, Redbeard here, too many beards. The beards have spoken. But you were talking about like elicitation, right? And probing, right? And so just as a human being to this day, I mean, just like with surveillance, detection routes, SDR, it's like, if you're being followed, once you know this and you've seen it, or you've been, either exposed to it, trained in it, or you wake up and realize what's going on. Again, you don't have to have been, graduated from the farm to know when somebody's like, trying to get something from you or get something out of you. But I think, as we've kind of went in a slightly different little rabbit hole, it's easy to do because most people want to talk about themselves. And anyone who's a trained collector knows that, and that's what you're playing on, right? You're manipulating, you're looking at body language, you're listening to the tone and inflections, you're matching, and I'm without going into this stuff, right? But that's exactly what's going on. And when I even have that happening to me, and it might just be, benign and totally innocent from a customer who's genuinely interested, dude, it puts up red flags all the time for me. And then to your point, Patrick, right? And I don't know if this ties in with you, Redbeard, but like, dude, there's a lot of education that needs to take place, corporate, executives or people in these positions. But can we do it? We're not a police state. So that kind of gets into liberty. But if we're not willing, again, we're willing to talk about X, Y, and Z and spend money on 1, 2, and 3. But what about the shit where it really matters? Like what we're talking about here. I don't see the effort being put forward. Redbeard, did I go too far away, or is that back on track? And then we're doing a break. We're almost at an hour, and we've already gone past our intermission.
No, it pivots exactly into where I was kind of hoping I was going to be able to pivot, except you got there a little bit before I did. I want to bring up just briefly, the realm of liberty, right? Like what makes us who we are as a country? It's the fact that we recognize liberty, we recognize rights, we recognize, individual, the individual's ability to go out and do things that they want to do and to make their life what it is. That's what makes us strong as a country, more so than our military might, because that is one thing that we value over anything else. Now, real quickly, the one question that really just sits and steeps in my mind, since really evaluating this discussion, is why is it that the very government that we supposedly have elected to be our representatives in all numerous matters, why is it that we would embolden these people to take these steps to deprive us of liberty via censorship? I mean, they've already done this over 4 years ago. You saw what they did during the Rona, and you've seen what they've done with many other things. And the idea that some people could potentially be on board with this is alarming, to say the least. But I don't think that any rational-minded person is going to say, yes, please take more of my liberty away via censorship of an app, because in the end of the day, where does it end? If we are willing to sacrifice our greatest strength as a country, which is the recognition of individual liberty and rights, then what do we have left? I would argue that we're selling out the best part of us. And I just want to end it with this. We know that if we allow them to have the leeway to do this and to gain this authority and this power, that it's often very broad, very obtuse. They very much fail to explain what it is that they're doing in many cases. That way it leaves them a much bigger doorway to get away with things. And this power of censorship is very pervasive already. It not only leads us down a slippery slope, but I would argue it pushes us down the hill.
All right, sorry, I'm furiously scrambling a note here as you were talking. And here, I'll just I'll go right into it, get back over to the mic, and then let's take it to Patrick. Honestly, no intermission tonight. I mean, I had a few little things, but we can save that for Thursday. Anybody who's watching this live, and thank you to everybody who is watching live, because I've already gotten a couple of comments that ScrewTube is not allowing some people to comment. So imagine that. And that this couldn't have been timed any better.
Yeah.
Because it goes to what you just said right there, Redbeard. And my note was how, so again, this is my shorthand for me, how we even speak and talk. So to your point, think about social media and think what we just said. I've got people already telling me that they're not able to comment on ScrewTube right now. And then, think throughout the whole, the realm of social media. Dan Crenshaw and everybody and all the rhinos and all the weirdos want to focus on banning TikTok. Do you really think it's going to end there? I mean, or is it going to end where if you say something they don't like, then that will fall under the guise or the aspect of, well, you're a terrorist or you're aiding and abetting the enemy, and it's a horrible situation. Because just think of what Redbeard just did, and what we are all guilty of having done in the last 4 years, it's coronavirus. We don't even say it anymore. We come up with and Rona and the jabby jab. We have already been conditioned to not use real language, to not actually get out and talk about a subject that each and every one of us has every effing right in. I don't even care if you're not American. Everybody has a right to have a conversation and talk about this. But when our language is so controlled that we can't have a conversation about what the F just happened here, who did what are the ramifications, these are legitimate conversations that everybody is, and especially if you're an American, that you have a constitutional right to have that conversation. And to Redbeard's point at the very beginning, where are all the quote unquote leaders and politicians who should be standing up for free speech? And, and look, hey, dude, you've got 240, capabilities, but the moment you start doing this, you're no longer a platform, you're a publisher. So you now lose the ability, why hasn't every politician in America, that should be a unifying thing. Everybody like, no, if you do that, you're censoring. And the fact that is happening should tell everybody something. Yep. This is a war. This is a war room conversation. I personally wanted to really get into the whole unconventional warfare coin, But to Redbeard's point and Patrick, kind of bringing it over to you, this is exactly what's taking place. So we're not even having conversations about another balloon floats across America and doesn't get shut down and collects all kinds of data. Or we've got traditional or non-traditional actors going out and conducting espionage on so many different levels, or probing our defenses, or potential biolabs. You notice that? There was like 2 stories a few months ago about the biolabs in 2 different locations. And on mainstream media, it's been crickets. Cricket, effing cricket. How in the hell would that ever, in a sane world, be not like one of the most important stories of your day? Hold it. You're telling me that some crazy dudes were somehow rented a facility without anybody knowing about it, set up a freaking chem bio lab? I mean, I get it. Maybe the guys, who are doing crack, I saw that TV show, Breaking Bad. They just drive out in the desert in Winnebago and do it, right? But these guys were like an industrial area creating like a biolab, and no one knows about it. And no one cares about it. So again, we're at a war right now, and this is a very serious adversary who knows our weaknesses, and our weaknesses, unfortunately, are getting us in big trouble. And I don't know if I just went on my own little rampage right there, which I may have done.
I like it, man. I'm here. I
may have done on my own rampage, but you kind of, Redbeard, you got me seeing red on that last comment. So
I just want to emphasize one more time. What's up?
I mean, am I wrong? Anybody watch this? Yeah. ScrewTube, ban me. Ban us. Whatever. How did I say anything that violates any bullshit term of service you want to come up with? And that's not section 214 or 240, whatever. I think it's 240. And where are all the goddamn politicians? So all the way back full circle. If this was really such a thing, then why isn't it such a thing? It's that Moneyball, which isn't a bad movie. And I'm not a big Brad Pitt fan, but if he's such a good hitter, why can't he hit? Well, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but his average is 240. Johnson over here's got a 370. Like, come on, man. If he can hit, why can't he hit?
Yeah. I just want to reemphasize.
You can see, I think I even got a little flush. I'm curious to see if I just pissed off half of the audience.
I just want to reemphasize one more time. Look, liberty is our strength. It's who we are supposed to be as a nation, is to value liberty over every other thing, to value our rights over every other thing. If we allow our liberty and our rights to be diminished to a point of just handouts and quote unquote goodwill by the government because we did the right thing one day, then we've lost our strength as a country. And there's no amount of diplomacy, there's no amount of military might, there's no amount of anything that's ever going to get us the real strength back that we have as a country. We are very unique in the fact that our founders decided above and beyond anything else that liberty and rights was important. And there's no more of a time to really emphasize that than now. If we feel that China is a threat, then we need to put liberty at the forefront and make sure that we are defending our liberty. And that's not what we're doing. It's not the first priority of our elected officials. And it makes me really question Okay, well, if you don't care about liberty, then how do I know that you're not selling us out more than we can already see to the Chinese? Maybe that's the plan the entire time. I don't know.
Well,
But
and honestly, and bringing it over to Patrick, because that was, sorry to interrupt you, but that was a perfect dovetail, because I know he's going to add to this, because that is, and that kind of goes to my point. Well, then how is it what you just said, Redbeard? How is that hypothesis you just posited? How is it not the truth? How is that not what, we're all, oh, it's conspiracy theory. And then 6 months later, they never retract it and apologize because, again, we've all been finally proven true. But if that's not the case, Redbeard, then how is it not the truth? Then how is it then they're not all over the place showing us and proving us wrong, right? Instead, it's like when they get busted, then they start talking about things. Patrick, I see you kind of smiling there, or that was a Cheeto you were getting out of your tooth. I don't know what it was.
Both. Yeah. Hey, so it's awesome that we've got the Legosoft quote down there, because that's you start to look at that in terms of like what our media is doing. On TV, right? That's kind of scary. We've got the Supreme Court, trying to determine, hey, were Americans' First Amendment rights violated, under COVID? Like, why are they trying to control the narrative? And is that even First Amendment? Yeah, it is. And it looks like they infringed quite a bit. It's disgusting. The question is, when you watch a lot of these media outlets, and then you also look at some of the stuff on social media, why would somebody do this type of stuff, right? Like, you can ask this question of the politicians or anybody for that matter. This is kind of like going back. It's an Intel thing, a human thing largely, and Mark knows it quite well, just like I do. But there's an acronym called MICE, and it's like it's the motivation behind why somebody would do something. And you can apply this to pretty much anybody, but the MICE, MICE says it's an acronym, but the M obviously is money. Is somebody getting paid off, right? You take a look at Swalwell. Is he getting paid off, or is there something else? Why does the media?
Not there was definitely a couple different things going on there.
Yeah. We'll get to that. He's probably things, but well, I should have brought him up last, but So there's that. Why would a group, a media outlet see something, know the absolute truth, and then try to spin a completely different tale out of it? And this happens on a pretty regular basis, right? So is there money behind it, or is it an ideology thing? That's the ideology. Why would somebody do something? Is that like an anti-American ideology? When you see like all the people coming across the border and you're denying it, or questioning why people would question it, that kind of makes you pause and say, well, why would you do that? What ideology do you follow? And it doesn't sound like anything that's like pro-American to me, but I don't know. I guess it's all up in the definition of what pro-American is.
It's in the definition of what is.
Yeah, thanks to that's a Bill Clinton thing, right?
Yeah.
So we've got that. The C is
that
coercion.
depends on what your definition of is.
That's right. I did not have sex with that girl. The C is coercion or compromise. Hey, that happens. I mean, think about like doing that with a politician or anybody for that matter. Hey, if you think that they're not going to go along with what you want, let's dirty them up. Let's get them drunk. Let's hey, you're found in a room with a dead prostitute and drugs and all this other stuff. Hey, you can work with us, or you can answer to this. It's probably going to ruin your life. That's one way. There's a law enforcement side of that too. When they arrest somebody, 9 times out of 10, hey, if you've got drugs or whatever the case is, maybe if you talk and cooperate with us, things will go by a little easier for you. That type of thing. That's usually not the best way to go about it. Ego, we kind of talked about that too. Ego, like when you've got people that are sales folks at these conventions or wherever, and I'm going to sell this guy. I'm going to tell him how great our product is and why it's better than this other product, our competitor. Well, guess what? Keep talking, man, because I'll be your biggest fan. Ego is a thing. Ego is a big thing with politicians as well. That's usually how most of them get to office. So that can be exploited. These are all things that can be exploited. And then finally, the S, let's come back to Swalwell. Sex, right? So the U.S. Government doesn't directly involve, intelligence officers in sex, but you know what? Guess what? If somebody's going to get paid, what they do with their money is their own business. Other countries and our adversaries have no qualms about using people for directly involved in sexual relations. I mean, Anna Chapman, she was moving her way up the political chains in New York City with her goal of getting to like senators and stuff like that. Feng had Swalwell, guy sits on the intel. Is he Hipsy or Sissy, Mark?
He was hip. Yeah, he's Hipsy. Yeah, he's Hipsy.
Yeah.
And I might be. Well, hang on a second. No, he was. Yeah, no, he's Hipsy. That's correct.
Yeah, House Permanent Select Committee of Intelligence. The guy sits there. Basically, everything that the U.S. government does as far as intelligence collection, this guy has awareness and oversight of, and gets to vote on whether or not we do certain things or certain budgets are going to be allotted to certain activities. So that's awesome. Wow, good to know he was having sex with Feng. And yet he still remains. He maintains his position. So. Yeah, but
and just to bring it over to me, you heard Patrick and I just kind of stammer a little bit. Hipsy and Sissy, these are the different intelligence select committees. There's the House side and there's the Senate side. I honestly, I couldn't remember if he was a representative or a senator. He's a representative. I just looked it up real quickly. So yeah, he was on the House side.
Yeah, but nonetheless, these people have oversight of all the top secret, special access type stuff that we're doing. And guess what? He's on the side, sleeping with Feng. So yeah, that's pretty disgusting. And that happens to anyone else in any capacity, from from CIA all the way down to some guy who's like an E2, E3. You're done. You lose your clearance. You're done. You're never getting hired again. How this guy's able to maintain that kind of illustrates this, this multi-tiered system of justice, if you even want to call it justice.
And that would be maybe a good segue for, Liberty. And this is why all the way back, to kind of a weird little not intermission, but just a reminder what Jeremy said, Redbeard said at the very beginning, right? Like, so these weeks are independent, but they're also interrelated. And, that's what Patrick just illustrated. Even when we sit and talk about liberty and what our constitutional republic, if you're an American, what it looks like, and if you're from a different part of the country, however your government is structured. But to that point, how is it? There definitely is a two-tiered system in that. So again, and then back into, you're talking about, I always, it's two sides of the same coin: motivations and vulnerabilities. And to think that there's not a country out there, even the countries that we consider our allies, dude, they can be just as adversarial when it comes to because collecting good intel might be a better trade deal or less money into NATO or whatever leverage you're looking for. So, but we're one of the only countries, it seems recently, that if somebody gets busted, and don't just think about Swalwell, go do your own research on this. There's so many more people, Wasserman, Schultz, Feinstein, right? There's a long litany of people who've never been convicted, never really been brought out on the potential counterintelligence side, but clearly had huge counterintelligence issues. And that, to me, and this is kind of, again, I'm taking a little bit of a point of personal privilege here and taking this a little bit on a slight sidebar, but this is exactly the problem, or the issue. If this is a problem, then why isn't it a problem everywhere? If this person can hit the ball, then why can't he hit the ball? Right. Yeah. It to Patrick's point, it is a two-sided, and this two-sided system of justice, or, only one blind eye. And Patrick's right. And I've said this many times. If I would have done half the crap that any of these people did when I was in the agency, my best scenario would have been, I would have just been fired and I would have lost my clearance, never been allowed to work in the intelligence community, the IC, ever again. Most likely scenario, I would have been breaking big rocks into little rocks for some period of time. These people get a pass, and that is incredibly annoying to me. And I'm just here to tell you, our enemies aren't dumb. They know this is how our system's working. So bringing that all the way back full circle to you, Redbeard, and then I'll shut up. Mm-hmm. That's exactly the hypocrisy of this. If this is a threat, then why aren't we treating it like a threat? Because that should get, and all I'm trying to do with this is to get everybody to scratch their bald head. Maybe we don't have the hair like I don't anymore. Hey, if that's right, if this is a threat, then why aren't these other things a threat as well? Or maybe this is a threat, but you're okay with that threat. it just opens your mind to like, what the F is really going on here? And on that, I once again feel like I launched into a tirade. You know, you and Patrick have got me I've totally lost. I wanted to talk. You guys have got me a little like fired up here tonight. So, all right, I'm going to turn it over. Who wants to go next? We're at an hour and 15. I think we're actually, honestly, boys, I'm just going to say this. Unlike Steven giving a shit about Minnesota goodbyes, I think we're in a good spot right now. This has been a great conversation. There's so much more to be covered. I don't even care if we don't get into that. That'll come up later. But I think Redbeard and Patrick, with your permission as well, sir, let's just take the next 15 minutes to wrap this up. And then, we'll have a good solid hour and a half episode.
Right.
Okay. All right. Patrick then, or no, Redbeard, you next, and then Patrick, and then you.
I'm just going to give a little something for Patrick and you to chew on, but a little bit of white pill here. Hey, gentlemen, at least Newland's gone, but I'm worried about where she's going.
and see, but this is a very serious question. There's so many layers of duplicity going on. Why is Newland gone? And if you don't know, we're talking.
She left of her own accord too.
Well, hang on.
And that bothers.
See, this is another weird thing. Look at all the Republicans who are leaving of their own accord, and look at what again. If you're playing a game of chess, what is the board game? What is the game board? What does the board even look like 3 months from now? I don't think we as Americans, we're not really seeing the big picture here, and we're just like, oh yeah, our team won. Victoria Newland's gone. Hang on a second, bro. What does that really mean? What's going on? Why are these Republicans suddenly leaving office, and some of them just bailing? And again, give Dan Bongino credit, and because he does a lot of good research, reaches out and talks and follows other accounts. If this ties into this conversation tonight, and it's a little bit more for Thursday, so I'm going to shelve it for now, but do your own research and ask yourself, why in the hell would this be happening? And who does it benefit? Going back into what Patrick's talking about, whether it's dime or mice.
Well, I had to say that in just kind of a semi-sarcastic way, because it's like, she's gone, but she's not really gone, if we're being honest.
Well, I'm sorry, you can see it. I couldn't even pick up the sarcasm, because we're in such danger here right now, Redbeard.
And when I say it does worry me, because it's not only just people like her, or Republicans or Democrats or whoever. Like, we have to bear in mind that there's also quite a few military personnel that are leaving. And, and when you have defense contractors, when you have companies like BlackRock, I mean, people like Newland and retiring generals and stuff like that, I mean, they are ripe for the picking. These companies want to pick these individuals up. And, I mean, where does it go from there? I mean, it certainly does nothing to benefit us. I would argue to say that the places that they're going are counterintuitive to us. And it's something that I think does fall into this war room aspect, because my next question is, okay, well, granted they're part of these NGOs, or they're part of these, these different contractors or large corporations, what ties do they have? Why are we not looking into those ties? Like, are they directly tied to our own government, or are they by way, again, connected to China? I mean, or whoever. It doesn't have to just be China, but the question remains, like, people are leaving of their own accord, like Mark mentioned, like I mentioned, but why? And it's not just a few people, it's quite a few people. So
and that just isn't coincidence, dude.
It's very bizarre. Yeah. So,
well, it's so bizarre that it actually starts, the dots connect them and it starts painting a picture and a pattern.
Yeah.
Patrick, I put mice up there for people. My only last little comment on that, and you did this, but I always just think, again, it's the same side of a coin, right? What a vulnerability, one person's vulnerability is another person's motivation. That's another way of kind of looking at this, right? So, somebody's motivated when it comes to sex or money or ideology. Well, that's something that you could also look at as a vulnerability. If I know you are an ideologue, I could pretend to be a similar ideologue and play on your vulnerabilities and get you to relinquish information or talk about things or share secrets or do something you may not other want to have or other want to do. I just wanted to throw that out there. And then as we're kind of wrapping this up, and I apologize, fellas, and to everybody watching. I again I'm not even going to get to my subjects. This has been such a great conversation, but it should be really, and I apologize for getting a little emotional, but I don't know how you cannot get emotional and think about this, because we're in big fucking trouble here. No matter, even if we win, this ain't going to be pretty. That's like saying, hey, I lasted 4 rounds with Mike Tyson. That ain't going to look pretty. Yeah, you won and you lasted 4 rounds, but you're walking around a steaming Slaga, ass kicked out of you. But Patrick, let's come over to you. Give us whatever you want to go, and then we'll bring it over to Redbeard for outro, and we'll see if we got any more final comments and questions. And I hope people really appreciate I've kind of done it in the past. We've done some classes on this, and we've done classes actually in the beginning, evolutions of our podcast, but Patrick's dumping some great data and some great knowledge on everybody. I hope everybody understands that and appreciates that. So I just want to say thanks, Patrick, for finding that less emotional way of communicating it, because I'm just getting worked up here.
No, thanks. And I get a lot of practice because my day-to-day, I'm walking around, with veins popping out, and I need to learn how to control that. It's not going to be good for long-term health, right? So, but if you care about the country, you have to take a look at these things and start to question. To me, that is what critical thinking is. It's questioning everything. Whether it's something like I wholly believe, well, why do I wholly believe that? Or something that you think is complete bullshit, right? Well, why is that bullshit? Or why is it even being presented, in a certain way? When it comes to, since we're kind of on China with this thing, folks, the threat is literally everywhere. And, since we just got finished talking about the politicians, and we talked about mice's, money is number one. All you have to do, and I learned this back when we were doing, or I was involved with narcotics investigations, follow the money. Like what is driving this thing, right? So that applies to politicians as well. If they've got a donor that says, hey, if you don't change your tact on this, that, or the other, you support this person or don't support that person, we're going to pull our funding, and now you're going to be stuck with something else. Or you've got all these other things in there too. You've got the ideology, but you've also got the compromise. Let's face it, a lot of these folks, they get in office and the power goes to their head. The saying goes, absolute power absolutely corrupts, and they make mistakes. Well, sometimes those mistakes don't fall on deaf ears. People see them and record them, and they'll just put that in their pocket for later on when they need something to happen and say, oh, well, guess what? We caught you, cheating on your wife or doing a line of cocaine or, whatever, right? You want to change your thoughts right now or your vote? Yeah, okay. All these things from the espionage world are alive and well in Washington, D.C. every single day. I'll end with this on the because it was brought up, the situation with like especially senior military officers going to work for large defense contracting firms, shortly after they retire. I'd like to see more on the DoD side, more investigations into what that general, colonel, command sergeant major, whatever role they were in, what ties did they have to this company beforehand, and were they able to approve any equipment or services for the U.S. government? And if they did, I'd like to see them proactively prosecuted for that, because I think a lot of times there's just like, oh well, hey, he's a man of honor and he was a senior officer. Let's let him go on his merry way. Well, hold on a second,
And to your point, following that money, and I just popped his name up there. I'm like, I don't even want to say this man's name ever again in my life. He's such an embarrassment, and I'm embarrassed to have been part of an organization, an entity that he was like a senior leader in. But like, this man had sold us out and sold out. He's actually committed treason. I mean, if you look by the definition, his own thing, like, I reached out to a foreign nation and communicated with them and basically said, hey, if my president does something crazy, I'll keep you posted on that. That's not how that shit works. Right. And again, back to Patrick and I, our previous conversation, I'd be breaking big rocks into small rocks. And now that guy, and to Patrick's point, I'm so glad you brought it up. And I know Redbeard's going to love this, and he's going to want to talk about it maybe on more on Thursday. That mother effer is sitting on a huge board, raking in money. And that's exactly it, Patrick. I don't know if the answer is to find a way to criminalize that activity, deny that activity, or if nothing else, we should be shaming them. Everybody should be like, hang on a second, you were doing this and now you're on the board of directors with the same company that Hillary Clinton and all these, it's the same bullshit. And even if it's not your political rival, how is it? Why don't you just take your retirement and just go off and do some kick-ass things and teach, Boy Scouts or, or something like that? Why are you doing what you're doing? It just begs so many questions. And then I'll pull up some comments while you guys, let's give Patrick a chance, Redbeard, to respond to that, because when it comes to you, it's response and outro. Patrick?
I don't have anything serious other than the fact that I think if Centerline Systems wanted to move to the next level, you need to hire a congressional affairs group.
Seriously?
Made up of retired senior officers who might have given contracts to different companies.
Right.
And then just for anyone who's just listening to the podcast as opposed to watching it, I just have to read a comment, a couple last comments here. So this is from Mike, and thank you, Mike. I feel you, Mark. Okay. Hopefully you're not as angry as I am right now, but thank you. But if I did anything close to the politicians mentioned, I wouldn't just lose my clearance and be busting rocks. I'd probably, shorten it, for the text message, but I'd probably be in prison. You're damn right, sir. Great takes all around from Patrick and Redbeard too. Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate that. And then Angry Viking Veteran, do we have any meaningful attempts at here? I'll just pop that up when I read it. Sorry, it says we're ending it. Do we have any meaningful attempts at collecting info? Sorry, Patrick, you're probably feeling like, why is he focused on me while he's talking? Do we have any meaningful attempts at collecting info in and from China? It sure doesn't seem like that. Matter of fact, maybe that's a great way. Redbeard will go just a little long if we do this, but Angry Viking has a great point. That's something that I can't field anymore. Patrick, I think, is way more the subject matter expert. Patrick, do you want to field that and maybe add to that, and then we'll come up to Redbeard for the outro? Are you willing to do that, sir?
I don't want to address it like in depth because I don't have anything specific. I just know that, obviously there's a lot of people that are disgruntled and dissidents that don't agree with the Chinese Communist Party that have left. I don't know how many of them are crossing in our southern border, but there's those folks out there, the folks from the Uyghur population that were being basically genocided. Some of those folks made it out. They still have family members and things there. There is opportunity to do that, not just in China, but all over the world. So, but I can't speak with any certainty or knowledge of anything that we've got going on focused on them. And I wouldn't want to either.
So I will take a stab at it, and it's completely conjecture, right? So I'm totally just pulling this out of my fourth point of contact here. I get the impression based on recent events, and this is a very serious. I'm not in that world anymore. I'm not looking at anything classified. I have no access to that type of information or those type of operations. But my answer to that would be, I think the answer is no. Or if it is, it's a half-hearted attempt. Go back to the beginning of the podcast where you got Dan Crenshaw saying we need to ban TikTok, but we're okay with them buying up, land near, our military bases or our secret installations. I think we get window dressing, and not give the serfs, give the masses bread and circuses. That's what it seems to me, because if we were serious about this, and per this conversation, if we actually as a nation, if our elected and unelected officials took it seriously, it would be a very completely different game. But if you just look at what's going on, even just things in the mainstream media, my gut reaction, total anecdotal, total my opinion, is no, we're not really doing anything serious. Angry Viking, we're not taking the threat seriously. And again, and just look at so many different actions that either our politicians take, our industries take. Now, I think the answer to that is no. I hate to say that. I really do. Yeah, there's, of course, I'm not giving away any state secret. Within any intelligence organization in the United States intelligence community, there is some little group inside of that organization that's focused on China. What they're doing and how serious they are in their, Patrick, am I fair in that assessment? You see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff dealing with China. I couldn't do it anyway. I couldn't speak to what their efforts are, but I'll put it this way: with the non-traditional collector, like the death by 1,000 cuts collection method that the Chinese government uses, there's no shortage of people to go after, right? From our side, they're literally everywhere.
Well, and even just our actions towards the southern border would indicate that I'm correct. Like, we aren't taking this seriously because, like Mark, evil Mark from the other side, your enemy Mark, I would be totally flooding, a bunch of UW coin type of guys, special operations types, however you want to phrase it. There's a bunch, but I would definitely be doing this across the border. And, and if I lived in a totalitarian society and everybody who flies to America, you got to see me to get your visa or get your flight clearance. Well, I'm going to give you a list of, collection criteria. And Patrick, I think you kind of mentioned that earlier, but that's exactly it. Oh, you're going to go there and study at University X. I want to know as much as you can tell me about these following subjects. And if you do a good job, well, your family might be able to have a larger apartment next year. And if you do a shitty job, you just might be, you see where I'm going with this. That's exactly what our enemies have. I wouldn't call it an advantage. But in the short term, coercion, violence, the threat of, and you see this starting to happen within our own society. So just think of why that's happening, because in the short term, it's actually a pretty good strategy. In the long term, I think it fails. But I digress, as I've done like 3 times now tonight. But I only muted myself once. Mark, your mic is muted. That only happened once tonight. Yeah. God dang it, guys. This subject just so gets me so fired up because it's the fucking grizzly bear right in front of your face, and we're just not paying attention to it. And I apologize to everybody. This is something that I do get animated about because I really do believe it's going to bite us in the ass really hard and really soon on a multitude of levels. Some of them just might be how it trickles down into our own society. See our Liberty Week episodes, and how that's influencing our own politicians and our own leaders domestically, and even, how we deal with each other internationally from the Western world, so to speak. I got to give Patrick one more opportunity for a final comment, and then we come to you, Jeremy, for final comments and closing. And I apologize again to everybody. I spent way too much of my life just to see it get pissed away like this, and it really does. So back to Mises. Hey, if you wanted to try to work me, well, there would be one thing. You'd come at me with like, well, Mark doesn't like this. Let's pretend we don't like that shit either. And maybe Mark will talk about this stuff, and maybe he'll do it on ScrewTube and he'll get kicked off and banned. Who knows? Whatever. Patrick?
Yeah. I'll just kind of wrap it up by talking about, I always like to look at how does this impact like our viewers or listeners? What can they do? Right off the bat, be on the lookout for anything in your local communities, right? Like find out, like if you're in a rural area, find out who owns the farms, talk to the people that are farmers, find out what are the challenges and things that they're running into. And maybe that's not by mistake, right? Maybe that's by design. There's I forget the name of the company, but up in Michigan, there's a large Chinese-owned firm. Of course, it's a Western sounding name that built a big facility to build electric batteries for vehicles and stuff like that. Well, luckily the local community found out about this, and even though their elected leadership was going to approve this, they all came out like raving mad, like no, you can't do this. We're not going to support this. We'll throw you out. We'll do referendums. We'll do whatever we have to. That made me very, very proud as an American to see that.
Yes.
And I honestly think that there's a lot more of that stuff going on. Be the person to wave the flag and go after it and call it out. Don't be afraid and wait for somebody else to do it, or at least communicate it, because it's really the only way that this stuff is going to, be identified. Because obviously elected leaders, because we look at mice, if somebody throws some money at some guy and says, hey, there's a little something extra in it for you to, support us building this factory, they'll do it. So it's up to the citizens to call it out and hit the media too. I mean, that's really, you can have all the town halls you want to, but if it doesn't hit the interwebs or big media, it didn't happen. So we've got to be louder with this stuff.
No, you're absolutely right. And again, that's why Jeremy's kind of concept of, Liberty Week and War Room and Be the Difference ties in, because, you just tied in all 3 weeks and all 3 formats into one, Patrick. High five to you, sir. And
Yep.
you can't get on the tallest of mountains and be the loudest ever. That never, what you just said never would be old. That needs to be repeated daily and said loudly. You're absolutely right.
That's right.
We've got one of the ticker, just for everybody watching, and I think Redbeard, it was you brought this up, but one of the tickers is exactly that. Like, it's that appeal. If we don't start standing up and speaking out against this, then what's going to really happen? What our future is up to us. I mean, it really kind of is. So Redbeard, I'm kind of almost a little deflated now, but Patrick kind of calmed me down. He's got that nice calming voice, he's, you kind of down off the edge. I'm not going to lie. I was on the edge there for a little bit, and you probably know some, but let's keep our personal comments about that video game a little bit to ourselves. We'll save that for another episode, sir. Trying to put a chuckle into your a little skip into your step here at the end of the podcast. Patrick, as always, I mean, you're just awesome. I really do think that if Patrick, I'm just going to say this to you, and we'll cover this offline. I know you're a busy guy. I would actually, and Jeremy, we haven't done this in a long time. We were doing some special broadcasts in that first couple centuries, by century, I mean our first couple iterations, where we were teaching some courses. I wouldn't mind if you and I just actually, and maybe we get David involved, and we did a little something, and we talked about mice, dime, Carver, all these, and just maybe help educate some people. So, because if one person out of 1,000, see, it might make a difference someplace. I mean, I don't know. But let's talk about that offline. Let's come over to Redbeard. I apologize, sir. Patrick, any last kind of comments before I bring it over to him?
No, I'm good, guys. But thanks again.
Do you have any more Cheetos? You want to show everybody your Cheetos?
I got to stop because I'm not going to eat dinner and I'm going to get in trouble.
Yeah, right. You're a good man, Charlie Brown. Hang on a second though, so don't go away when we end this. Let me bring it over to Redbeard.
Yeah. So I have just a short list of my key takeaways of this whole conversation, but also just of my own deductions prior to this conversation. And there's really 4. The first one is I don't really feel that there's any real concern for the actual security of the country or the people. They really are just, it's all semantics. It's all half measures. And I think mostly there's several reasons to that. A few maybe pertaining to the fact that maybe there's something to be gained for doing half measures or going at a certain area. I don't know, but I would suspect that there's several motivating factors there. I think that the overall approach is completely misguided, whether it's by their own will or not. I think it's very misguided in their approach. Why would you deal with an app when there's so many other things that are far more critical? And ultimately, if you do go about the route of an application and wanting to nullify it or ban it or whatever the case is, well, then you create a demand for unconstitutional power and authority. And we know that there's no limitation on that. Once it's provided, they're not going to yield it or give it up after they've gotten it. And so overall, to kind of bring all this together, what you get is the destruction of individual liberty. And ultimately, you have a destruction of both the state sovereignty and the country sovereignty, because it's a culmination of bad dealings, bad diplomacy, bad, overall disposition on what the issue is. And I think if people actually took this seriously, we would focus a lot more time, people, and resources on protecting the infrastructure, protecting the sovereignty of the states and the people and the country over our land and our resources and so many other things. I mean, I like these two have said, we could go on, but I think you get the point, and those are my key takeaways for this evening. So,
well, I'm just going to bring up a last little comment here as we're doing that, and I'll bring this back over full screen. But and that what you just said really to me made me think of that thing from Jefferson I just brought up. I mean, and I'm sure everyone who has, watches this, is watching this with us now live, or watches this on demand, or listens to this on Spotify. I think there might be something that's echoing through your brain right now, which is that, and a lot of people have said this statement recently, like good times bring about soft men bring about bad times, that statement right there. We're clearly in one of those peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's, like some type of scientifically proven statement right there, but because, if soft men bring about bad times, look at history. Bad times also could be the end of your civilization or your species, right? So don't think that we're just going to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. I mean, this might be that existential fight for the freedom of humanity for the next, millennium or epoch or whatever it might be. I mean, like, we seriously could be in that type of scenario right now, because we just had a bunch of Supreme Court justices that just suddenly seem that it's okay, like if the government violates your First Amendment. And I can't even believe I even read some of that stuff today. And again, I know we should save that for Liberty Week, but this is the world we're living in. So if people who think that, well, no, the government can do it, they can infringe upon your First Amendment because, the government, like, even though the Constitution says the government can't do that, but you have people twisting the logic. So if it's happening there in the most obvious of sectors and areas and of topics, well, what's been going on behind the scenes, coming down to Patrick's point? How many other people have been corrupted or influenced or recruited? I'll just say it. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole art of recruitment, is to recruit somebody without them even know that they've been recruited, or to give them the ability to say, I'm not really working for them. I'm really doing this other thing. Look at all the lies that politicians. So this is the danger we're in, boys and girls. That's my final comment right there. Yeah. Redbeard, Patrick, hang on a second. Let me just bring up Angry Viking a couple times here. Okay, right here. This hurts. This episode hurt a bit. I know some guys who gave it all for this country, but I don't believe they sacrificed all for the country we have today. My good man, that's why we're doing this podcast. That Jeremy and I, when we decided to do this, it's for that type of commentary, and it's that type of feelings and emotion and motivation. It's exactly that. I'm the same boat as you. Unfortunately, many of us are in the same boat as you right now. Yeah, that's why we're doing this. And that's why we're having these conversations. And we're trying to, and hopefully you and everybody else who watches or listens to this goes out and tries to carry the torch, just even, or whatever analogy you want to do. But we've got to get out there and start talking about this, and we have to do it. As even if it hurts, rip that freaking Band-Aid off, because I don't know how else it's going to get any better. I really don't. And we're in I really do fear it. I fear we're in big trouble. And I'll stop it right there for tonight. We're gone a little bit late. Patrick, comments?
No, I mean, I could jump on that. I mean, I think that's a great point that Angry Viking made. We've all lost friends throughout the, global war on terror and other things. And I think this is something that we need to remind ourselves from time to time. We need to bring our communities together, and we're doing that to honor them. That's why we got to keep up the fight. We can't afford to just sit back in the shadows and gripe and complain. We absolutely have to remain vigilant, call things out, and band together.
Damn right.
Yeah.
Redbeard, take us out, brother, man. I'm going to leave Angry Vikings comment up here for a bit, though, while you do it. Matter of fact, I'm going to leave it all the way through. And, thanks everybody for watching tonight's episode. This is just part 1 of War Week. Live stream 1. Live stream 2 is on Thursday. Patrick, unfortunately, will not join us on Thursday. Something about a family and some other bullshit. Who knows? But, seriously, I didn't even get a chuckle. Thank you. Now I get a chuckle. Come on, man. We love you, brother. We love you. But all right, we love each and every one of you, no matter who you are and where you're from. If you're here watching this, then something tells me you're on the side of freedom. So thank you very much. And on freedom's note, Redbeard's got one of, I think, the world's greatest outro, and I'm going to get teared up here. Here we go, boys and girls. Bring it on. Bring it on, my good man.
Yeah. So listen, the flame of liberty shall not and will not ever be extinguished so long as there are good people that are willing to support and defend it. And that means each and every single one of you. And look, in order to do that, we have to be active in our communities. We have to learn to be a little empathetic. I know that's hard for some people, but you can do it. I believe in you. And that means really trying to put your best foot forward every single day, improve yourself as a person, as a husband, as a mother, as a son, a daughter, whatever it might be, and really be a net positive in your community and around the people that you're with, because we need that more from each other than I think anybody realizes. And so to me, that is going to be the driving factor to turn things around. And it's going to be the driving factor to helping make this country into a place that I feel our founders wanted it to be, a place that respected liberty and rights and truly hoisted up the individual as being a fundamental pillar to creating a more perfect union and a more perfect country. So that being said, it befalls on us, and it starts with us, it ends with us. So I hope everybody has a fantastic evening. Thank you for joining the Mission Critical podcast, and we hope to see you on Thursday at 1800 Central Standard Time.
And there we go. All right.